I'm your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW, EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 77 of the Future Template Parent Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Carolyn Solo, LCSW. Thank you for joining me as always. And today I'm excited because we have a special guest on the podcast, one of the members of the first cohort of my group, Mary Fleisch, LCSW. And I'm going to just have her introduce herself a little bit, and then we can get into some of the meat of the conversation. So first of all, Mary, thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Carolyn. Thanks so much for having me. So my name is Mary. I'm an LCSW in private practice. I have a private practice in the Bay Area in Oakland, and I specialize in working with folks who come from dysfunctional families, folks with childhood trauma histories, and recently introduced intensives into my practice.
So exciting. Yeah. And excuse me, how did you kind of get into that population?
Yeah, so I got into working with this population. I used to work in a methadone clinic, and I saw a lot of folks with trauma there. And the more I worked in a community mental health setting, the more I realized what I liked working with was folks who came from difficult backgrounds and folks who had trauma, and working more on the individual level than in a community mental health space.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, those spaces are hard. Lots of us have been in them of different kinds. Yeah. And so you started your private practice. Did you say that? I forget.
2020.
2020. Okay. Right. So in the pre-pandemic or right once the pandemic started or where?
Yeah, no, I started right when the pandemic started,
Yeah.
which was actually a really convenient time to go into private practice. You didn't have
Yeah.
the overhead. It was a good time to make that jump.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And yeah, no, I think that's true for a lot of people, that that's when they started, whether on purpose or just because it worked out that way. I actually started mine in January 2020, and I just wanted to do virtual and have a few clients, and then March came and it was very easy to do that. So next I would just love to hear a little bit about, what made you start thinking about intensives, kind of where you were at with them before you started the program, kind of what made you want to be in the program, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I've been using EMDR in my practice for a long time. So I got trained in 2019,
Okay.
and I had been working in the 50-minute model and just started to feel really frustrated and kind of getting a little bit burnt out working in that way. It would feel like, with EMDR in a 50-minute format, there's so much stop and go, and so much dropout from actually completing a target. So something that you start out working on just takes so much longer when you're working in the weekly format. So I was feeling a little disillusioned with using EMDR in my practice and relying more on other modalities, but wanted to focus more on using EMDR. So, I threw intensives up on my website, probably about a year and a half ago. So technically I was offering them in my practice, but I wasn't marketing them, and I wasn't actively trying to pull clients into doing it. So I never actually got a client with intensives.
Yeah. Did you ever talk about it to your clients? Talk about intensives to your current clients?
I didn't. I didn't talk
Yeah.
about it with my current clients. I think in large part, I think there's a big piece of seeing to believe that something works. And I hadn't experienced the intensive model, and I didn't have, I think, a belief within myself that it would work.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. For sure.
yeah, so I think that for me was the biggest block, was like, I want to offer this new way of working, but I've never actually done it before. I've done plenty of EMDR, but I've never actually done an intensive. And will it actually work in the way I'm hoping it'll work?
Right. Right. Yeah. And how did you, I mean, I know it's not like intensives are some big secret, but how did you sort of get the idea to put them up on your website at all? Did you know other people that were doing them, or were you?
Yeah, I think I first heard about it from a Facebook group. I've seen them circulating around. I didn't know anybody personally doing them. Occasionally, I would see something pop up on a listserv of somebody offering it and thinking, oh gosh, that's a
Mhm.
cool way to work, but not quite, sure that I could pull that off.
Right, right. And when you had them on your website, did you have like a format that you were using? Were you saying like, I don't know, 2 hour sessions, or was it just sort of vague?
I'm actually trying to remember. It was more on the vague end. I wasn't doing I think I was doing it in 3 hour blocks was how I was
Hmm.
offering it.
Hmm.
Um, and in retrospect, that would not have been enough time really to do an intensive. Now that I'm actually running them, a 3 hour block really wouldn't be enough time. So I think I also just didn't have a whole lot of clarity on the format that would work well.
Hmm.
And I had heard mixed things about EMDR. Folks saying that like you should never go over 90 minutes of processing time is stuff I had heard before.
Interesting.
And I've also, I just didn't have a really good example of what they actually looked like in practice.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting about the 90 minutes of processing. Never heard that.
Yeah.
Wonder where that comes from for people.
Um, I don't remember where.
Like it would be too
I
much,
think I
maybe.
did I did like a little introductionary course, and I think someone on that course said that sometimes it gets harder after 90 minutes of processing. I'm not exactly sure where I picked it up, but I had it in my
Yeah.
mind that clients would struggle going beyond 90
Huh.
minutes of processing time,
Interesting.
that their
I,
nervous system would be too taxed.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is, of course, that like you can't possibly know how an individual person will respond because everyone is like a blanket statement like that just feels, you know, it would just dissuade people from doing them rather than, you know, it's interesting. People do have all sorts of things they've picked up and biases about stuff that aren't necessarily founded in anything, you know.
Yeah, and I think with intensives, like there's just not a lot of information out there about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like trying to come up with a model of how to implement them actually on the ground in your practice when you don't have a really good, clear idea. Um,
Right.
and the introductory course I took gave you some of the bare bones, but it really didn't go into depth on what it actually looked like in the room and
Yeah.
the time frames and how to set it up. It
Right.
was kind of vague, and it's kind of fill in the dots of what you think it's supposed to look like. But I was a little unclear on how to actually implement it when it came down to it.
I had the same experience. I took two kind of like self-paced like video courses on them. And I was like, okay, you're telling me it's okay to do them. You're telling me I should do them. You're telling me I'll get good outcomes, but like, what do I actually do? That was the part that I felt like was missing. Um, so yeah, I know I hear that. So yeah, so what sort of piqued your interest in the group then?
Yeah, I was coming back from maternity leave, and I was in a place in my personal life where I needed to step up my financial game, if you will. I
Hmm.
needed to be pulling in more income, and also I had this really great opportunity where I didn't have a full caseload coming back from maternity leave.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I was starting to build up, and I'm like, gosh, this is a really good time. If I want to make big changes in my practice,
Hmm.
this is the perfect time to do it because I don't have to reschedule or move around clients. I can set up the structure from the gate of what I want my practice to look like.
Yeah,
So
totally.
the
No, I
opportunity
think
was
that's
good.
very true. Yeah, yeah. So, um, yeah, because that is really hard to be like, okay, I have 20 plus clients a week. Now, how do I make this shift for sure? Yeah. I think it's easier when you have more space already. Um, so yeah, so when we started the group, I remember you kind of being in the place of like, I don't know. I feel like I remember something that you mentioned, which I thought was interesting, was like that there was sort of like this maybe animosity in your kind of therapist circle about EMDR, and that was something that you were concerned about.
Yeah, the more I have thought about that in retrospect, I think a lot of that was my own head trash. If I'm being
Mm-hmm.
honest, like I think that was my own limiting beliefs coming up around um, putting myself out there in marketing. I think that was something that I was telling myself, even though I didn't really have a whole ton of direct proof.
Yeah.
Um, but I think a lot of work and launching EMDR intensives in my practice has been mindset work
Yeah,
and
for sure.
realizing where I'm holding myself back. And
Totally.
and I think there's some thoughts around one modality being the right way. And I think that in some circles, people lean really heavily on a certain modality and are
Mhm.
skeptical of things that they aren't using as much.
Right, right.
So I think there was a little bit of truth to that. Um, but I think in large part, it was something that I was making a lot bigger than it actually was,
Hmm.
because I think I had my own fear of putting myself out there and marketing to therapists in the
Yeah,
community.
for sure. Yeah, right. And the fear of how you'll be perceived, for sure, for
Mhm.
sure. I mean, I think one of the things that has been really cool in seeing what you've been doing is how you do um, integrate IFS so really, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, very, very smoothly. I can't think of a better word, but you know what I mean. That you do a really nice job of bringing the two together, and that intensives kind of allow that to happen in a deeper way,
Absolutely.
you know.
I think most of the population I work with have complex trauma. And something I've learned in different trainings that I've taken with complex trauma is slow and steady is the
Right.
way you work with folks with those complex histories. And an intensive is definitely not slow. But I also think that it provides, now that I've seen it in practice and I've actually seen what it looks like, it provides more safety to go deeper. You have more time to
Mhm.
sink in.
Mhm.
And folks that I'm using it that do have these complex histories are preferring working in this way because you have the safety to go deeper. And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that it's, a one and done thing. You're not going to do a 15-hour intensive and suddenly cure your
Right.
your lifelong journey. But you are going to see results from that 15-hour intensive. And it's continual work for folks with those kinds of histories, right? It's like
Sure.
maybe you do an intensive to jumpstart your healing, and then maybe you're circling back doing a day long once a quarter. So it still can be steady work. Um,
Absolutely. Right. And you don't have to say this relationship is now over at the end of it. I
mm-mm.
mean, you can if that's the model you want to use, but you don't have to. There's no one right way to work intensively with people. But I like what you said about how the 3 hours not feeling like enough. Like I think that's almost like, I'll just say that I sometimes see people posting on social media like, "Oh, I have a 2 hour intensive today," and in my head I'm like, "That's just a longer session."
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm not going to get into that quibble. I don't care what people call it, but like, I think that they're not equal. Like it's not the same thing to do 3 hours with someone. I think it's a great way to get both you and the client used to working in that way,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not, they're not the same. There's a lot of difference in how, so many things about them are different when you have that much time in a short window,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so yeah. I mean, it's not, yeah. I just always think that's interesting. It's such a buzzword now,
Yeah.
intensives are a buzzword,
Prior to
which is good.
prior to offering intensives, like I was doing double sessions, right? That's all that
Right.
is, but it certainly is not the same type of situation as doing a full intensive. I think also what I've noticed with my clients who I'm doing it with is the intention around it. Because it's a big investment, it's a big commitment, and it's a big emotional, spiritual thing to gear up to do this kind of journey work that you're doing.
Totally.
Folks are more engaged and you have more buy-in, and
Absolutely.
yeah, there's more openness to going deeper in ways that are just so much harder to do when you have that weekly standing appointment.
Absolutely. And the standing appointment sets a different kind of frame. Like it's just a different, the relationship is different. It's like I'm the person you see every week, and that often ends up being we spend 10, 15 minutes just talking about whatever happened to you this week, even if, you know, on in theory you're here for EMDR. Like how often does that actually happen? But with, like you said, the intentionality around putting aside all of this time, you're not going to do that. It's just, that's just not, I mean, it doesn't, there wouldn't be enough to do of that in 15 hours, but people show up differently and the therapist shows up differently. And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
So your experience of the group, what felt, I mean, you said that mindset work was huge. And I think that is so important. And like, I think often people think it's not that big of a deal in it before you, that like, oh, well, yeah, sure, mindset. But it's so huge. It gets in the way of so much. And I'm wondering for you, like when you kind of worked through some of those blocks, what felt like you could, what felt more accessible to you then, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Confidence, like knowing, like I think having more of an example of what it looks like when it works in a practice really helped to kind of work through some of that. And also having peers who are having similar struggles and having that space to really get support, I think was really helpful. And just time. And again, it's almost kind of like you're doing an intensive in your business when you sign up for this group. You are setting
Totally.
so much intention around it. You're setting money, time, energy, commitment in a way that it takes it off of the back burner, and it's like it's in your orbit. You have to do this. You already invested so much in this.
Absolutely.
You're showing up and you're
Absolutely.
doing it. So I think that was a big piece, and really starting to face and notice like where, for me, like noticing where I was being stuck and where I was holding myself back.
Mm-hmm.
Like where am I getting in my own way
Mm-hmm.
with it, if you will? And like I think what I mentioned earlier, some of the stories and preconceived notions around um, like feeling like you aren't enough or you aren't good enough to do it, or what people are going to think if you pitch them a $5,000 intensive, what your colleagues are going to think. Are your
Mm-hmm.
colleagues going to think that this measures up to like the standard professional standards, clinical standards? Right. So there's all of these stories. And I feel like having the group to really feel grounded in my
Mm-hmm.
confidence of what I had to offer, um, for me, helped me kind of break down some of those stories and figure out like how I can get out of my own way and feel and show
Yeah.
up more confidently in how I'm pitching myself, not just with clients, but with colleagues.
Right, because it's both. You really need to do both. Um, and one thing I saw you do really well, like a number of things, but I thought you used the forum. So we have like a board that that you can post on between the calls, and I felt like you used that really well. Like you really took advantage of that resource, and it also set a really nice tone for other people to do the same. So when I started the program, I was like, sure, we can have this discussion board, but I wasn't really sure if it would take off. And then it became this really integral piece. And I felt like you used it really well. So I was wondering what you thought about kind of how you used that part of
I thought it was really helpful. Just as I think that was one of the missing pieces when I had done the self study stuff is like, I'm stuck. What do I do about this? I don't know. I don't know the answer to this
right.
problem of actually implementing this advice that they're giving me. I don't have the solution for this. So to be able to, one, get support from you who you have successfully done this in your practice, and two, other folks who are trying to implement it in what they're using that's working for them on the ground right now, was really helpful. And just building community around it and having, I know if I'm feeling stuck on something, I can reach out to one of them even now, to see like, hey, how have you done this? What's worked for you? Because sometimes I think the impulse when you hit a stuck point, when you're not sure what to do, is to put it on the back burner, not look at it. But having space where you can get immediate support keeps things a little bit more front and center and a little bit more focused. So
yeah, for sure. It's so easy to just be like, oh, I don't have time for this right now. I can't figure this out. I have a million other things to worry about. And then it becomes, that thing that you're still trying to do, but it isn't working. Yeah. And what I thought was so cool too was seeing how, like, even just like, I'm thinking of another group member who is just starting to learn how to use like Instagram stories, and you know what I'm talking about, and you provided like this beautiful breakdown of like, because you do a great job, like your Instagram is very, very strong, and like I think you provide a nice example for the people who aren't doing that yet or who struggle with it. And so I just thought that was so cool how you all have different areas of expertise that you can bring to each other. And I have seen on her Instagram, she's like made great strides. And I know it's because you kind of coached her through it in this really helpful way. And also we show people that like, this isn't that scary and hard, whatever it is, whether it's talking to colleagues about intensives or posting on social media, it's not hard conceptually. It's just hard work, but like it's masterable. Everyone can do this. It's just like the commitment part.
Yeah, commitment and the mindset work, I think.
Yeah.
Like believing that you can do it.
Right. And having other people believe that you can do it, I think helps, and having other people expect that you're working on the things that you're working on. I think that always helps me so much. Like accountability for me is everything. That's how I get stuff done.
It was absolutely helpful. I remember early on in the group, folks were already tackling their website copy. And I still had my old outdated website copy that really wasn't helping me or doing my practice any favors. And so I was able to see, what other people were doing on their website copy and feeling motivated to dig into that, to dig into it. And now when I have a consultation, sometimes folks find me on Google just for Googling intensives. And they often say like, your website copy is awesome. And really makes it super clear what you offer. And I think having, working on that side by side with other people was really helpful to see what they were doing and to kind of encourage each other.
Yeah, and you gave each other great ideas. I could see on each other's websites how like there was kind of a back and forth mutual, yeah, and that's how it should be, right? None of us should have to do this in isolation because lots of people are out there with good ideas. But our field, it's so, especially private practice, it's so easy to feel completely isolated. Like, you could never leave your house and have a thriving private practice, and never actually see anyone face to face, and that's great. But it can, I find that part so isolating. So like having colleagues is huge, but it takes effort to build those networks in our field. Like it's so easy, you don't have to. And so it's just it was really cool to see how you guys formed those relationships that were so and continue to be mutually beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that our cohort is going to continue to be a good support for each other. And I love that because private practice can be pretty isolating.
Yeah.
And having folks who are working in a really different way. Having others who are working the same way as you when you're working in a different way is really helpful.
It is. And, I did I think I told you guys, but I did this retreat in Vegas like 2 years ago now, it must have been, on intensives, and it was a weekend long. And that was the group for me that was like, oh, I need that is what made me realize that the group is everything. Like we still have like a WhatsApp chat that is very active, and, and it's different than just posting on like a Facebook group, which while that can be helpful, you don't know who those people are, whereas when you know the people that you trust and like you have a relationship with, it's so different to be like, here's this thing I'm struggling with, than to a group of 500 people you've never met. It makes all the difference. So yeah, and it's just cool to hear about people, how they're making intensives work for them in their practice, and it's very motivating. So I would love to hear you talk a little bit about the intensives you've done during the group, because you just really ran with it and did some really cool stuff with current clients. So if you would be willing to talk a little bit about that process for you and how you got people to agree to it and how it worked for you and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I have 3 clients on my caseload who I was working with individually, who I'm now working with intensively. And so I've done 3 intensives with current clients. And
like one was 1 day, one was 2 days, and one was 3.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
We did a 1 day, a 2 day, and a 3 day.
Yeah.
And for the 1 day client, that's someone who I'm going to continue to be seeing probably in an intensive format too, which is pretty cool. Someone who I'd worked with for several years and really significant trauma history. And in the context of a 50-minute session, we were really struggling. We were really struggling to go deeper. We were really struggling to have the space and time. And I think the biggest piece was the continuity. Because, doing this work is hard as a client. It's not easy to do EMDR. It's really freaking hard.
Yeah.
And when I have done EMDR with this particular person, I get really overwhelmed. And we would do plenty of stabilization, but coming back to doing EMDR was always really challenging because it's not enjoyable as a client to do EMDR work. So
yeah. And you're agreeing to like pushing, like basically with EMDR, you're like, okay, we're going to go to the places I don't want to go.
Right. We're going to go to the places I don't want to go. And this particular client had a lot of resistance at first and wasn't sure that he wanted to work in this way. But we kept exploring it and just getting curious about if it could be helpful for where he was feeling stuck. And we did a 1 day intensive, which was a 5-hour intensive. And we had done, some prep work leading up to it. And we were able to make so much more progress in just 5 hours. I think we cleared 2 full targets. Granted, we didn't have to do as much as the prep with. If you have somebody coming in fresh that you haven't worked with before, you're going to have a little bit more of a lead in. We were able to jump in a little more quickly because we had the rapport and the stabilization kind of together.
And his history with you.
Yeah. But was able.
Well, that's probably why 1 day worked so well, is because you had all of that.
Right.
Scaffolding already built.
Yes, we already had the scaffolding built. I don't think I would offer that for somebody coming in that I didn't have the background with, especially with complex trauma. But this particular person noticed really big changes, really big shifts in areas that I feel like we had been circling for years. Like I worked with them for 3 years. And we were able to really get to places that we weren't able to get to in a 50-minute time frame. And when I've spoken with him after the intensive, he's commented that just having the time and the space, he's able to kind of relax back some of that anxiety, those parts that feel like he can't handle it. He's able to feel really supported in this structure, this container of a full day to be able to go deeper. And big shifts, big changes post-intensive. And I just had a session with him recently and he's talking about wanting to schedule another one in the new year. So
amazing. That's so great. And I just think something that, of course, we talked about a lot and continues to be something that people grapple with is the cost of an intensive, right? Sure, it is a big investment. And the kind of results you're getting, if you weren't getting these results with him from 3 years of work, right? Like maybe we actually could move people along more quickly, and instead of being like, well, now you'll be in therapy with me for the rest of your life,
Right.
which is not the goal. I mean, it's not. And so, not to make it just about money, but like there is, a practical reason. There are many practical reasons why this can be a better option. Certainly, pulling that money together at once is hard, but like if you can manage it, the benefits can be huge. And so it can get really easy to get stuck on the price tag for both the therapist and the client, I think. But it's so worth it, I think, in so many ways.
And I think people prioritize what's important for them. And yeah, I think that people find a way to make it work.
I think so.
It's expensive up front. Yeah, it is. But also I think your return on investment is higher with doing an intensive. Totally. You just get more progress more quickly, to where I think the price tag is honestly fair.
I do too.
For the results and the type of treatment you're doing.
And the investment of time and energy on the part of the therapist. Like, we have to value that. Like, I think I believe you said this, that like, it's energizing to do an intensive for sure, because you see results. It's also draining. And like, it also requires, there's so many moving pieces to make the time for it, to energetically be prepared, all that stuff, all the holding that happens and the training that to feel confident. Like, that's expensive on so many levels, in so many ways. And yeah, I'm not going to be charging $50 an hour for this. Like, no. And or 150. I mean, it's just, I'm not, it's not worth, I wouldn't do it if that was what, like, it wouldn't be worth it. And so we have to honor that for ourselves. And yeah. And it does take kind of getting out of our own way to be okay with that. But I think that was a great thing about the group, is that people were working through that together and coming from a place of like, oh, maybe I'll charge less per hour for this than to like, double what they had charged before per hour. And that was just great to see that progress, and that really deeply accepting that is what makes sense and what was the right thing to do, and not like we're just greedy and this and that or whatever. But yeah, we're not.
No. And I think clients understand and the value of it as well. Like for the folks that I've done intensives with, there's never been a remorse or like, I wish I wouldn't have done that. Everyone's like, I want to do it again. It's worth the time, money investment.
Totally.
And yeah, I think we undercut ourselves as therapists, and there's such a culture of martyrism that we don't take care of ourselves. And yes, we want to be accessible. We want to be able to give back, but also we got to take care of ourselves first so we can give back. And there are many different ways to give back.
Yeah. And it's not our job to be accessible to everyone. And I there are people who think that it is. And I there's not much we can do about that, but we can certainly for ourselves not accept that and show how amazing the work can be if we take care of ourselves. What is actually possible,
And the folks who are usually giving you grief about that are the ones who are not putting on their own oxygen mask, and they're frazzled and fried and not taking care of themselves and not showing up in the best way that they can.
Right. And that, to kind of deal with the reality of that, they have to put other people down. It's like a way that they cope with that, kind of the subconscious stuff that comes up for them. That's an easy thing to do, is slam someone who's not doing that, but yeah, so it's a constant struggle for us. And I hope that over time we can, like, therapists can let that go more and more, but it's I don't know, it's real. But it's yeah, it was just really great to see all of you kind of the journey of that piece as well. The financial piece was huge. What about the 2 and 3 day? You don't have to talk about them both, or you can, but I just a little about how those went, were they,
Yeah,
kind of how you sold that to people, all that kind of stuff.
absolutely. So the folks who I've been working with on a weekly basis, as I started pitching intensives, I was surprised how easy it was to convert my current clients, but they're like, yeah, I'd love to stop coming in here weekly. I mean, it's, nothing personal. I like you. And
No, but
like,
exactly.
it was
Yeah.
like the therapy golden handcuffs.
Right. 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, our clients want to feel better. And so here is this thing like, and these are all clients who I have done EMDR with before. So they're all familiar with EMDR. They know it's helpful. They see the results after completing a target, but like, my gosh, it's so much time to get there. It takes multiple sessions. It's hard to come back to it. So when you start talking about those pieces with clients who are familiar with the model, it was not a hard sell at all. It was kind of a no-brainer for most of them.
Yeah.
And the 2-day intensive, again, this is another client with a complex trauma history background, who needs a lot of space to feel grounded, to feel supported, and the 50-minute session was just hard. And the 2-day intensive, we were able to again make so much progress and complete and finish up areas that were really hard to get to in a 50-minute time frame. So yeah, I don't think I would offer anything less than a 3-day intensive for folks with complex backgrounds coming in, for sure, after seeing what it's like on the ground with my current clients. And I think the only reason that those shorter intensives worked for those clients was because there was so much work we've already done to be able to support that. But yeah, it's been a learning curve for myself, kind of figuring out what works and how I want to bring in more folks for intensives in the future.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's certainly why I always tell people, like, start with your current clients. Like, that's going to be the easiest way to get someone, so you can build that confidence, know that it's something you can do, that you want to do, that's going to make it easier to pitch to other people. But yeah, the new client thing, I mean, I think there's the reality just of, at first, that it can be hard to get private pay clients, period. And then you're adding on this extra layer of, I'm trying to get private pay clients who want to do this very specific thing. And if they don't know about it, then I have to explain it to them. So it isn't as easy, of course, but I think those people are out there. And I do think that more and more people, like, intensives are something that I've had people come to me who already know what they are, as opposed to just like, oh, I want to try EMDR. They've already like, oh, I want to do an intensive. I know you do them, or something like that. So that only benefits us to have people talking about it in that way.
I don't think that's the ideal person that you're marketing to. Also, is the person who has no idea what EMDR is when you are asking people to come in and make this kind of commitment. I think you're talking to folks that are a little bit more problem aware and solution, like they know the solution. They've heard about EMDR. Like, I have folks reach out that have heard about EMDR, but aren't familiar with intensives. And that's like a harder sell, but not impossible. Like, I have a couple of prospects for next year in the works with incoming clients.
Yeah. And I think it's about, like you said, kind of like refining your pitch.
Yeah.
And that just comes with time. And I think that, like you said, it makes sense. Like, it's not, just some money grab. It's like, here's this is why this makes so much sense. And there are a lot of people who really respond to that. And yeah, who don't, like you said, the therapy golden handcuffs. They don't want to be coming for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. What if they could meet some goals really quickly and say, wow, I'm good for a little bit. Let me just see how this settles over several months, and I could come back if I want to. But, they feel really, it's a sense of achievement and accomplishment for them too. Like this is really a big deal. And I think that's part of what's important to convey to people is this is a big deal. What you're choosing to do something that's a big deal, because that really helps with the intentionality, for them and for us, So what would you say a little bit about the 3-day intensive, just because I feel like you accomplished some really great things with that
Sure.
person? You don't have to
Abs-
reveal too many details, but just in general.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, again, this is someone who I have worked with, and she was coming in for work related stress. So it was a work related target with multiple instances. We used RTEP, which I learned from Carolyn, which has been really helpful, to kind of structure the intensive, and worked through all these points of disturbance related to kind of a present trigger that was really, really debilitating for her, and really holding her back. So in doing that, though, because we had the luxury of so much time, when I started to pick up on a blocking part or belief coming up, we were able to kind of pivot and change focus and bring in a little bit more parts work and a little bit more, like we kind of shifted out of our original treatment plan and worked with the blocking belief and did EMDR with a childhood feeder memory, which was something that she was not aware of at all. That was contributing to this present trigger that she was having. And, once we worked with that block, it was just like the processing flew by. And yeah, no, it was really cool to see.
Yeah. And just like you said, having that time and space, you guys were able to get to a place that she wasn't even aware was connected. And in 15 minutes, like what, maybe that happens every now and again, but it's very, very hard to get to that place.
Yeah.
You can't get through a single target in 20 minutes of processing usually.
No.
And often, yeah, it's really hard to stick to a treatment plan. Like things just evolve week to week. It's just not, it's not the same. Yeah, this allows this allows that sort of singular focus, but still gives, like, the time gives space for that flexibility.
Absolutely. Like it's not, I mean, you're doing an EMDR intensive, but you can also pull in other pieces that help the processing if you have allows you to be more creative with stuff you already know how to do when you're implementing it, by bringing in stuff to kind of help the EMDR go more smoothly.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love about intensives. And there was somebody in the group who is a play therapist, and what a cool piece to bring in, even for adults. Like I think that could be so fascinating and productive, and something that I'm sure a lot of other people would like to know about. I just think that's such a cool concept that yeah, but it would feel very hard to fit that in 50 minutes to get to the place where you'd realize this could be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the creativity of it is one of the things I love about it, and like the fluidity,
Yeah.
like I think intensives are what helped me realize that EMDR is a very creative modality. It's not rigid. I mean, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. But you need space and time for exploration and experimentation to figure that out, I think. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you think, now that you've got some experience, you've done some really successful ones, what do you hope, in a year from now, or what do you, I know you said something that you're thinking about doing, well, you speak to what your plans are next,
Yeah.
because they're cool.
Yeah, great question. So I am currently training in ketamine assisted therapy. So I'm hoping to bring that in, offering it just as that service too, but also bring it into the intensive format. So that's still very much so beginning, kind of figuring out my grounding and my landing with that, but I'm really excited about it. And again,
it makes sense. It seems like it would beautifully integrate.
journey work, right? Like you're
Yeah.
already going really deep in an intensive without having that enhancement, and then you're just adding a little bit of an enhancement. Yeah, so I'm really excited about that. I'm also hoping to expand to offering intensives for couples and kind of merging EMDR intensives with EFT therapy. So I'm working on that.
That would be so great. So great.
Yeah,
So useful, so important.
absolutely. And I know there's a lot of stuff in the EFT world right now of bringing in CAP as well, ketamine assisted psychotherapy.
Oh, okay.
Could even merge those three.
Sure.
So I don't know. I think I'm still kind of figuring out what I want to do. But it's opened up a lot of possibilities. That's got me thinking outside of the 50-minute constraint. Having the time freedom to be creative with my practice and really kind of chase what I want to do has been really cool.
Yeah, and I think, the unique time and environment that we're living in, this is the kind of, I think this appeals to a lot of people working in this way, and both on the client side and the therapist side, but that people want this kind of option. I mean, look, I love therapy. I've been in therapy for a long time, but I think there are people who are like, am I just going to keep talking about the same thing forever? And I think those of us who work in these more like body-based, somatic, bottom-up modalities know that like talking about the same thing gets you maybe this far. and for some people that's a lot. But for those of us who really feel the need to go deeper, there are amazing creative options out there, and there are people who want that. And so it's really that, matching your marketing to that market. and yeah, I'm excited to see what happens for you. I think there's great stuff ahead for your practice, and it's just been really cool to watch just the beginning stage of this evolution.
Thank you.
Yeah. And what do you think, I'm trying to ask this without being too leading, you know well, you've already sort of said this. Like, what felt like the most important part of the group for you in terms of where you were to getting you to where you are? Like, why was it a crucial piece for you in this evolution?
Yeah, mindset work, community, accountability, confidence. Again, I think the investment, just like we're asking our clients to invest in themselves, we are investing in ourselves when we put money and intention and time and energy behind it. And when you are investing that much time, money, energy, I mean, you're going to get results.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's a lot of people in the group who said things like in different ways of like, I knew what I should be doing, but I wasn't doing it. And I think a lot of us are in that position, and that's very normal. There are so many things that could occupy in our businesses that could occupy our attention, and the ones that are a little bit harder we just don't do. Like, there's one person in the group who was very honest. She's like, I don't like being seen and I hate marketing. And we're like, well, fair, and you're gonna have to if you, and like, but she knew that, but she needed the accountability and the like other voices telling her that. In like a very loving way, supportive way. But like she knew that already, but she still needed, like you said, the investment and the community and the support to actually make her do that. And I think that's often the thing that is holding people back. And like, yeah, the isolation, kind of the stories you're telling yourself about why this won't work, like you need something to explode those for you.
Totally. And getting really clear on where you're getting in your own way. And having challenges to step outside of that. Like for me, was historically not a big fan of networking.
Very few of us like it.
Yeah, no, not the biggest fan of networking and cold calling and trying to pitch yourself to your colleagues was something that was really hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to get those 3 contacts done each week, and each week it
Mm-hmm.
got a little bit easier. Um, and then your confidence grows that you can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a combination of like getting over the fear of what will this be like?
Hmm.
And it's also getting your name out there. It's very much like I feel like with networking, it's very much like sometimes it's immediate, but often it's not. And we have to be like, okay, this is a continual like practice that I have to engage in and just getting in the habit of that being part of how you're like part of what your work life is,
Yeah.
as opposed to, oh God, I better network because I have to. And then, again, it becomes the thing you never do because it's not enjoyable. And like I know there's some people out there who are like, oh, networking becomes fun after a while. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think parts of it can be, but I don't ever promise that it becomes fun, but it's like certainly necessary. And it gets easier. It gets easier,
You
you
figure out
know.
your style of what works for you, like what works for one
Right.
person might not work for another. And you figure out,
Right.
like, oh, I'm really good at networking with people on Instagram because I'm already showing
Hmm.
up there.
Right.
So it's easier sometimes to connect with them. Or you notice, like, oh, connecting with other therapists who are a little outside of what I'm actually doing has been really helpful. And yeah, you kind of
Hmm.
fine tune and tailor what works for you when you start actually having to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd say like 90% of therapists I know don't really like networking. So it's not, you know, it just is what it is. If you're private pay, you're going to have to. That's just how it is. And if you're doing intensives, that's not covered by insurance. So you're there you are, and that's just the truth. People are not going to just find you if you throw it up on your website.
Mm-mm.
They might, a few people might, but most people won't. And I think something we talked about too is like how marketing is like this many faceted thing and they all kind of support one another,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that's really important. It's important to have a good website for people to go to when they get your name from somebody else, you know, and all those things need to support one another, especially in the world we live in now. Like people expect a relatively sophisticated, you know, business presence if they're going to be investing a lot of money in you, and that's reasonable, you know. Like, I know I still know this. I think I talked to you guys about this once, but this therapist in my where I used to live, who was very well established, but she'd been around a long time. Her website is a disaster,
Oh.
but she's probably close to 70 at this point. So she did all the on the ground work before web presence mattered. But if I were coming to her just out of I would look at that website and be like, I don't like, no, this is not the energy I'm looking for,
No,
and that's important, so
it's a very different time too.
yeah. Oh
When you
yeah,
when you started when way back when, right? Than starting now. Like there's
totally.
more saturation, and you definitely have to find ways to stand out.
Absolutely. And absolutely. And like, and even if you never get quote a client off of Instagram, I think that having that resource for people as another way to get to know you does help. And sometimes things do come just from Instagram, but I often find that all the different pieces come together into why someone chooses to reach out to you. It's not just one.
Something I've noticed with my marketing is it's like what you put the most energy behind. So if you put a lot of energy behind networking, it's going to pay off. If you put a lot of
Hmm.
energy behind Instagram, it'll pay off.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to work hard and put a lot of energy and effort
And consistent.
into the ways that work for you.
Yeah,
Doesn't have to be one specific way. There's a lot of different ways to market, but it does require like really consistency and showing up.
absolutely. And that's if you, I mean, sure, if you want to take insurance, you don't really have to do that. But
Yeah.
if you don't, well, then this is what it is. So. Well, is there anything else you want to add before we close? Just because I want to respect your time.
No, well, thanks for having me.
No, it was great. It was really great. And thank you for sharing all your experience. I think it'll be really valuable for people to hear. So, and yeah, I'm excited to see what's to come for you in the next several months. I think it's going to be exciting to watch where your practice goes. So, yeah, I was so glad you were in the first group. It was great to have you.
Yeah, it was really great to be there, and definitely for folks who are on the fence about it, I definitely found it worth it. The time and the it was a worthwhile investment, and I think it's important as therapists to invest in yourself. When you are in grad school, you don't learn marketing. This is something that you have to pick up on your own. And I've never regretted investing in myself when it comes to marketing and getting support.
Yeah, same. And yeah, it is necessary. And like you said, we expect if we want our clients to invest in themselves, like we have to be creating something on our end that is worth that investment. And that often takes money, time, energy, it doesn't just happen. So, well, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for listening as always. And Mary, where can people see what you're up to? You have a great Instagram presence, so definitely let people know what that is.
Yeah, you can find me at adulting_unlocked on Instagram.
It's a great name.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm trying to do a little spin on, showing up for yourself in the ways that you didn't get. So, Adulting Unlocked on Instagram, or you can find me on, through my website at maryfleisch.com.
Awesome. Well, I will put all that contact info in the show notes so people can find you. And thank you again this was great. I really appreciate your time.
Okay. Thank you.